Hi there, and welcome to Switch It Up, and today's review will be Chronos Before the Ashes, which is a prequel to the 2019 game Remnant from the Ashes. Now, Remnant will be released on the Nintendo Switch later this month. Maybe we'll do a review on that soon. Chronos was originally released in 2016 for the Oculus Rift and was developed and published by Gunfire Games, but then was overhauled and re-released in December 2020 on multiple platforms published by THQ Nordic. Without giving too much away, you start the game as the nameless protagonist listening to a storyteller who goes on to tell you about the state of the world as a post-apocalyptic dystopian future where the world of man has fallen to an enemy from deep within the rusted places, commanded to attack by the dragon. The story has enough intrigue to keep the player involved as it features small truths about the world as you go along. In the first clip scene, the storyteller mentions there used to be tens of thousands of humans, and this gives a real sense of time passed after a great calamity. You travel to an alternate dimension through the Great Stone to take on the dragon, but wouldn't you know it, when you get there, you find that the dragon has three champions that you need to take down first before you can proceed to the slaying. And there are other bosses that you will need to deal with along the way before you can progress through the game. The graphics are dark and dank, which can lead to you not being able to see in parts of the game. You can get your view obscured by objects, and you might not have objects load until moments after you enter the scene. The animation has a real Dark Souls feel to it, and that's not the only element of the game that can be compared. Overall, the gameplay is good, but the mechanics can be a bit clunky and hard to get used to. On my first playthrough, I found it very difficult to dodge because, unlike Dark Souls, you're not invulnerable while dodging. The parry system seems very difficult as well because it takes precise timing, and I've found the character movement to be too sluggish most of the time to pull it off. There are different sets of equipment that might make this easier, but for the most part I found myself using the large shield and the hammer, as this provides me with the best defense and greatest attack to take on most enemies. I believe this method was adopted by most who played the game, as I've watched a few videos of people playing since, and throughout they seem to be doing the same. There are a great variety of enemies that steadily get harder as you go, which you will need different strategies to defeat. Some require you take a more defensive approach, while others are more aggressive. The defensive approach ranges from just blocking with your shield, parrying, to actively dodging as a giant club comes swinging towards your face. This is possibly one of the best elements of the game because you need to be thinking about your enemy's next move, preempt it, and counter. The game can be quite unforgiving as there's a limited amount of XP to be gained in any one zone without dying. The monsters do respawn if you die, but death in the game carries a penalty in the form of the character getting a year older every time. This affects the mechanics of the levelling up system. As you get to your dotage, you find that strength, agility and vitality stats become really expensive, where the arcane stat becomes cheaper. I think this is the only penalty, but I can't be sure as I only made it to 60 years old, so who knows. Maybe you get weaker as you get greyer, maybe if you get too old you die before you can go and face the dragon. Healing during the game comes in two forms, either when you level up or with the imbued Dragon Heart. However, there are only 4 of these in the game, and once you use them, they don't refill until you die, meaning that strategic death becomes necessary before major bosses. This system is punishing, especially on the harder modes. For every 10 years of the character's life, you get a status increase, which usually affects strength, arcane, or defense. These give you a well-needed boost to be able to take on enemies and bosses. As you navigate your way through these strange lands, you have to deal with varying puzzles. Most of the items you will need can be gained in the local area. However, there are some items that you will receive quite early on, and you won't use them until much later. The puzzles themselves tend to be easy enough and can be completed quite quickly. The controls on the Switch were confusing at times. For example, holding A to run, I wanted to hold down the thumbstick like in the majority of games. Having the shield and parry buttons as L and ZL led me to hitting the wrong won on many occasions, but I didn't have the same issue with the attack and heavy attack in the same format on the other side of the controller. I don't believe that the Switch handles the game too well, as the graphics tend to mess up on occasion, especially with shadows and fine details such as plants and grass. The loading times are quite long, and this can be frustrating to the flow of the game, sometimes waiting 5 minutes for the next environment to load. So, what did I think? I think from all that's preceded this, you can kind of get the idea that the game isn't perfect. But what it does well is that feeling of banging your head against a brick wall trying to accomplish the near impossible. This is what Dark Souls should have been all those moons ago, when people started calling it the hardest RPG of all time. Far from it, Dark Souls is quite easy. Chronos, on the other hand, is definitely hard, especially when you play the harder difficulties. The issue with Chronos is that it's too linear, you never get lost or at a loss of what to do, and it sometimes feels like as long as you can pass the hordes of enemies and the bosses, the rest of the game is just given to you. I would rate this game at 7 out of 10. Great storyline, okay combat system, a lovely variety of enemies and strategies to combat them, but lacking in other areas. Thank you for listening. This has been Switch It Up's review of Chronos Before the Ashes.